Hi everyone, and welcome back to the interview series we are doing as part of the Multilingual Mind lecture series. Here, we are interviewing different speakers and asking them questions about their research and their background. Our next speaker is Prof Bernhard Brehmer, who will be giving a talk on the 24th of November on Age Effects in Bilingual Acquisition, Observations from Different Groups of Polish-German Bilinguals. He's the professor of Slavic linguistics at the University of Constance, and his research focuses on multilingualism in the individual as well as in society. He has done a lot of research on heritage languages, that is, languages that are learned as a minority language, mostly in the home setting. So we firstly wanted to know how he got interested in this topic.
Well, for me, this was quite intensively linked to my own professional career. And that started actually when I started to study at university. When I studied Slavic languages, this was at the beginning of the 1990s. This was a time in Germany where we experienced heavy immigration from the former Soviet Union and from Poland and from other countries to Germany. And as a result, Slavic languages became an integral part of the German linguistic landscape and soundscape. So when I attended courses at university, I always had some fellow students having a Slavic language background. And when I became a researcher myself, so when I finished my state exam, then the number of students increased who also had a Slavic language background, but where there was a very huge degree of variation with regard to the individual proficiency levels that they had in the Slavic languages. And so this is why I became very interested in this variation. And I asked simply myself, so what are the language internal and language external factors that impact on the level of proficiency in the heritage languages?
Secondly, since the speakers of heritage language are mostly in contact with the language at home, we wanted to know if the measures taken due to COVID, for example schools closing and the lockdown, had at least some positive effects on the heritage languages.
Well, this is a good question, and I'm afraid there's no easy answer to that question. I mean, one could, of course, expect that due to the closing of schools, due to the introduction of homeschooling, the relative and absolute amount of exposure that the children receive from their parents or that they are exposed to in their families is, of course, I guess, higher if compared to normal times where the children spend a good proportion of the day outside of the family, in school or in contact with their peers. So this would be an aspect which I would guess that the heritage speakers are benefiting from, that they have some more consistent exposure to the heritage language or higher amount of exposure to the heritage language. But there's also, of course, some aspects which might be more challenging for heritage speakers to use the heritage language within the family, because given the fact that many of the heritage language speakers don't have the academic registers of their heritage languages, this might pose some problems when they are forced to discuss with their parents some exercises, for instance, in mathematics or in physics, because this is where you need this academic register to talk about things, so this metalinguistic stuff, when you talk about exercises in the heritage language. And I think this might also pose problems for some of the heritage speakers who lack these academic registers in the heritage language, and they are more or less forced then to go back to German, which might force also the parents to switch to German as well. So yes, I would say this goes both ways to a certain extent. So of course, the prerequisite would be that the parents consistently use the heritage languages with their children, which might not always be the case, and especially in these instances where they have to talk about things with their children where they normally would also use German, so even outside of COVID pandemic crisis times. So I think, yes, there are pros and cons of this situation with regard to heritage language maintenance.
Thank you, Professor Brehmer, for answering the questions, and thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the interview, and I hope to see some of you at the lecture series on the 24th of November.